wondered why you feel tired after a workout? Or feel so weak when you're ill? Stay tuned to find out. Fatigue is a term used to describe the sensation of tiredness or a lack of energy. Everyone would have experienced fatigue at some point, either through a lack of sleep, poor diet, or just boredom. But it isn't the same as feeling drowsy or sleepy. While I was planning this particular episode, rather ironically, I was experiencing a period of fatigue. My muscles felt weak, I couldn't concentrate on my studies, and I just was not feeling myself. Now, fatigue can be a normal response to physical exertion, such as the muscles fatiguing after a workout or due to a lack of sleep. But this will quickly resolve following a period of rest or catching up on your sleep. It's self-limiting and doesn't require intervention from any medical professionals. This is acute fatigue. Fatigue ongoing for months that is not ameliorated by rest is known as chronic fatigue. Fatigue accumulation that is not resolved can lead to overwork, chronic fatigue syndrome, overtraining syndrome, and some endocrine disorders, immunity dysfunction, organic diseases, and can be of some harm to your health. The most commonly known cause for fatigue, and the one I'll be focusing on primarily for this episode, is from lifestyle factors. This includes physical exertion, but also a lack of physical activity, a lack of sleep, consumption of alcohol, consuming too much caffeine, and consumption of a poor diet. These factors cause physical fatigue that mostly affect the motor pathways of the nervous system that lead to the muscles peripherally as well as centrally. But these are easily reversible causes. The next class of fatigue that I'll focus on in an episode later down the line is mental fatigue. This refers to the cognitive or perceptual aspects of fatigue and are most often linked with mental health issues. And thirdly, there are the physical health condition causes. Fatigue is a generic and often only symptom to a vast array of medical conditions. And it is these that typically result in chronic fatigue, as they often require medical intervention to resolve. Here is a list of some of the most common medical conditions with fatigue usually as their only symptom. Should you experience fatigue for several weeks that is not alleviated by sleep or rest, please go see your GP or family doctor for a checkup. Below in the description of this video is a checklist of symptoms that if you experience any of these, you should definitely go see your doctor. Now, this section is in particular reference to muscle fatigue following exertion. Muscle fatigue is defined as a decrease in maximal force or power production in response to contractile activity. As I alluded to earlier, these causes can be separated into peripheral and central fatigue. Central fatigue originates from the central nervous system, so your brain or your spinal cord. This results in a decreased neural drive to the muscles. Peripheral fatigue is produced by changes at or distal to the neuromuscular junction. This is the point at which the nerve touches the muscle. While there is strong evidence of the involvement of the neurotransmitters dopamine, serotonin, and noradrenaline in the contribution towards central fatigue, their effects have been seen to be contradictory during changes in temperatures, sometimes increasing performance, sometimes decreasing performance. So the jury is out on that one. The central nervous system controls the regulation of motor unit firing. Motor units are individual neural cells that signal a collection of muscle fibers. It has been shown that a slowing or cessation in motor unit firing contributes to the loss of force marking fatigue. Repeated firing of these motor units decreases its ability to respond to the continuing excitatory input. So the more that it is used, the less able it is to respond to the stimulus in order to contract. The other main contributors to muscle fatigue occur peripherally, at the sarcomeres affecting the excitation-contraction coupling. If you want to know more about this mechanism, I strongly advise you to watch the YouTube video, The Mechanism of Muscle Contraction, that I've provided a link to down in the description. If you've gone and watched that video, you'll now understand that it is the calcium ions that allow the muscles to contract. Once depleted, the muscles will relax until calcium is made available again. Anything that affects the availability of calcium from the sarcoplasmic reticulum to the sarcomeres will result in muscle fatigue. Byproducts of muscle stimulation such as potassium, magnesium and phosphate are ions that have been proposed that reduce free calcium and the amount of calcium available for release. Thus, fatigue is a consequence of overstimulation. The act of muscle contraction is dependent on oxygen and energy to prevent fatigue. Therefore, good blood flow to the muscles is required to provide oxygen, as without oxygen, the muscles will become dependent on the non-oxidative pathways for their energy, which is a limited source. These non-oxidative pathways will become reliant on the breakdown of glycogen. Reduced glycogen storage in and between myofibrils, has been associated with impaired release of calcium from the sarcoplasmic reticulum, again contributing to muscle fatigue. Once these stores have been depleted of glycogen, there is no longer that instantaneous access to the glucose molecules required for energy production. No energy production, no muscle contraction. Thus, the smaller the store, the earlier the fatigue. The final chemical that I'll mention that is a contributor to muscle fatigue is the reactive oxygen species. This is a byproduct of mitochondrial production of energy. As the work increases, so does the amount of reactive oxygen species. They have been shown to oxidize the cell proteins around the sarcomere, resulting in inhibiting the sarcoplasmic reticulum's release of calcium and inhibiting the myofibrils' sensitivity to calcium. And they also inhibit the motor neurons directly. To try and summarize, muscle contraction is limited by the availability of calcium. Too much stimulus or too high a workload will result in a reduced amount of calcium available. This reduced availability in calcium results in a reduced production of power. This results in the sensation of muscle or physical fatigue. This is a protective mechanism. If these byproducts build up in the body, they can become toxic, and overcontraction of the muscles can lead to damage or injury. Muscle fatigue is there to maintain homeostasis and thereby protecting our bodies. It was thought that the presence of lactic acid directly contributed to muscle fatigue due to the increase in the acidic environment, but that theory is now uncertain, as it also appears that lactic acid increases the availability of calcium to the muscle cells, thus potentially counteracting its negative effects. Excessive heat has been shown to increase the perception of fatigue, much like when you have a fever. However, it is the core body temperature which is the variable to take note of. Mild increases in peripheral temperature have been shown to initially improve performance due to the Bohr shift, which increases the availability of oxygen for metabolic processes. However, once core body temperature increases to beyond 38 degrees, it has a detrimental effect on your performance. And if your core body temperature reaches above 40 degrees, it can be potentially lethal. The effects of hypothermia is something I'll be covering in a later video. It is the feeling of tiredness and muscle weakness. During exercise, this can be seen by an inability to sustain a given workload, such as during running or weightlifting. In weightlifting, there is a training mode where you lift until fatigue. However, this is only temporary fatigue, as it will resolve immediately once the exercise is stopped. To put it very simply, don't work so hard. As shown in my video on the long-term adaptations of exercise, it takes time for these adaptations to occur. Fatigue is the marker of our physiological limit. There is evidence of drugs and supplements that can delay or reduce muscle fatigue. A well-known one is amphetamine, but it is a drug banned by the World Anti-Doping Agency, and it is illegal in the UK for good reason. A more accessible and legal drug is caffeine. Caffeine has been shown to improve performance during activities lasting 5 to 30 minutes. It is thought that it induces the sarcoplasmic reticulum calcium release, thereby potentiating muscle contractility. Raw garlic has shown to have anti-fatigue effects. While it doesn't really have any effect on the muscles themselves, it appears to decrease the heart rate at peak exercise and workload on the heart, thereby reducing perceived exertion. In terms of supplements, it's really more about topping up what you're deficient in, rather than adding to anything in particular. Preventing nutrient deficiency is what will ensure optimum energy production, and it is that will help with your performance, rather than increasing your performance. In those with diets adequate in vitamins and minerals, supplementing has no real effect on improving performance. However, with those with pre-existing deficiencies, supplementing can help improve progressive fatigue resistance. Creatine is used by the body via the creatine phosphorylative system to provide energy when the rate of ATP utilization is higher than the rate of production by mitochondrial respiration. It is not harmful, and it is found in red meat and seafood. It has been shown to consistently increase performance in high-intensity intermittent exercise. It is regarded as legal by the International Olympic Committee, so it is a commonly used supplement as an ergogenic strategy to improve muscular endurance. However, supplements such as carnitine, generic protein, ornithine, arginine, and glutamine have no supportive evidence in their claims to improve performance or reduce muscle fatigue. Ultimately, a diet sufficient in these vitamins and minerals should be all that is needed to reduce muscle fatigue. But just as important is ensuring adequate rest between training sessions or sets, so avoid overtraining. Listen to your body. Learn when your body needs to take a break to avoid long-term fatigue turning into a medical issue. I will stress this over and over and over again. Rest. Recovery is the best cure for acute fatigue. So reduce the training load or introduce a taper. Make sure you're getting enough sleep. I'll be talking more about this in the next video. Ensure your diet is nutritious and that you're eating regularly. This includes adequate hydration too. Also, tackle any sources of stress, as this can contribute towards fatigue. And remember, if you've taken all this advice and you're still feeling fatigue beyond a few weeks, please go see your GP or family physician. And that wraps up today's video on fatigue. I hope you've enjoyed it. Come join me next time when I delve further into the effects of sleep on exercise and fatigue. If you enjoy learning with me, remember to like, subscribe and ding that bell so you can be the first to know about the next video.